So what I'm going to do is run a Jupyter notebook, and what I have in my Jupyter notebook is a verbatim copy of the curriculum. All right, so we'll start running through this together. The topics we're going to cover with advanced data frames range from some basic ways of making brand new data frames that are novel to y'all, to getting a data frame converted from a SQL query. So let's jump in. This is going to be really great stuff. We've got to do our imports here. And we've seen this example before where we create a data frame out of a dictionary where the column names are the keys of that dictionary, and the values for those columns are either lists, NumPy arrays, or some other collection. Right? Now, this is not the sum total of ways of making data frames. One way to make a data frame is to specify a dictionary where the keys are the column names and the values are a collection, like A and B here. We can also create data frames out of lists of lists. We do that all the time. Right, so if we have a list of lists here, the first list on our list is 1, 2, 3. That becomes our first row. Second list becomes our second row. And if we have a scenario like this NumPy array is the same thing. It's a list of 2 lists, but we're turning that into an array. Notice in the constructor for the data frame, we can specify column names manually if we want to. We could call these this, that, and the other in order. In case you have raw data and need to provide a column name manually. Another way of retrieving or getting a data frame is from a function that gives you back a data frame. And an example of that is from PyDataset. And y'all did this with mammals and MPG, right? So those give us back a data frame as well. Now, here's something that's really, really powerful, is making a data frame from a SQL query. So what I want to do here, I want to demonstrate this for y'all, and then we'll run into the first set of the exercises. And this is perfect at timing right before lunch here. So I'm going to walk through this process and show you what to do, and then we'll have you do things. So in order to talk to SQL, we need to install another package through pip. And the way that we're going to do that, it's this first link or not first link, but it's this python-m pip install PyMySQL. So actually, let's all pull up your terminal and do this right now. It's going to save us a little time. So python-m pip install PyMySQL.
What the python-m?
The module install. Yeah. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I want us all to do this together, if y'all won't mind. And I'll put that in Slack as well. So this is going to install some drivers that allow Python to talk to SQL. And just like that, I think we're in what, week 5, something like that? We're going to be writing 2 different programming languages at once. So now while that installs, I want to provide a little bit of orientation here for y'all. What I'm sorry, go ahead. I have a question from Arsene. Yes, please.
So should we install it from the root or from code up databases?
Run this anywhere in your terminal, doesn't matter.
Thank you.
So we often send requests over the internet with http:// or whatever. Now we're going to be sending requests through pandas. And it's important to know that there's a pattern to locations on the internet. And the pattern is protocol://. So when you're talking to a website, https://. Well, our protocol is going to be a little bit different, and this is going to be all in a piece of string. We're going to have the string MySQL, hi MySQL. So we're saying, hey, I'm talking to MySQL through this library called PyMySQL. And then on the right-hand side of the :// we have the following general abstract patterns. And then beneath here, we have a concrete example. So in the general example, we have the username followed by a password, followed by the @ symbol, along with a host name separated by a / from the database where we're connecting. That's the abstract pattern. Here's an example of a concrete pattern. The concrete pattern would be MySQL plus PyMySQL : / if your username is CodeUp, then you write CodeUp : and then whatever your password is. And that's a pretty crappy password, right? But this is for demonstration purposes. After your password is over, we have the @ symbol, because the username : password @ host says, hey, go talk to this computer and tell it who you are. The computer that this connection string would connect to is the computer at the IP address 123.123.123.123. Now our server is not that IP address, but this is an example. After the /, we would specify a specific database name. And this is all going to be a piece of string or multiple pieces of string concatenated together. Okay. Now that we're writing SQL code and putting passwords in strings, we need to be very defensive here around and protective of our credentials. So we need to make sure that we don't, as much as we want you to add, commit, and push all of your work, I don't want to see your passwords on GitHub, right? You want to see my head just turn around in circles and lift off, commit your password to GitHub. Now, how do we keep our passwords from making it to GitHub? Well, first we need to talk about how we actually store these things, the credentials and the host and everything else. The first thing that I'm going to do, I realize there's a little, actually, we'll have you do this in the exercise. The best way to keep your password off of GitHub is to have the file that lists that username and password added to your gitignore. So this is number 2 in the exercises. And in fact, to be extra safe, I'm going to advise you to make this file, make your gitignore file before we even make a Python file that contains your password as a string. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. On your terminal, now the order is going to matter here in your NumPy visualizations folder. Run echo env.py :\gitignore. And don't make up your new own, this is not a place to be creative. There's lots of places to be creative, but file names that talk to Git, it's not a place for creativity. .gitignore is baked into Git so that any file you list in .getignore will be ignored by Git completely. So here's what this is going to look like. If you run this command, echo env double angle bracket .getignore from your terminal, I'm going to do that as well. I should also demonstrate this, right? Oops. So notice I'm on my terminal right here, and by running echo env.py double angle bracket .getignore, notice that command didn't provide any output. That's because the terminal, when it does your bidding, just does your bidding. It doesn't tell you that it succeeded. But how do we know that this succeeded? You do an ls, I'm sorry, you do an, after you echo env.py and .getignore, you do an ls/la, and you should now see a file called .getignore in your NumPy pandas visualizations repository. Mine is called DS libraries because that's kind of the same thing. Yeah, the curriculum calls this, the module is called data science libraries. The repo we had you build is called NumPy pandas visualizations exercises. Well, guess what? The industry calls NumPy pandas and the visualizations libraries data science libraries.
But I accidentally did it first in my home directory, that would be an issue.
No, all the better, even all the better. It's not going to hurt anything.
Can you repeat that? What he asked?
And the question was, if I created a getignore in the wrong directory, is that going to hurt anything? And the answer is no. I'd love to have env.py and a getignore in every directory everywhere, just in case, just out of paranoia. How do you know that this ran correctly? The first thing you're going to do is from your terminal in your repo, type code.getignore. And here's what this should pull up. It should pull up a text file that lists env.py. You may notice env.py, we have yet to create this. What a getignore file is, folks, is a manifest of files or folders that we're saying, hey, Git, this is none of your business at all. Okay. So that's all we need in here. If for some reason you had a copy of your tax return in this folder, you would want to say tax return.pdf. Please, dear God, don't put a tax return in this folder. But a getignore would ignore that, right? So all this is a list of files. Does that make sense? There's nothing more complex to the getignore than the name of files or folders you're ignoring. You don't write anything else in here but files or folders you're ignoring. Question?
I'm just having a problem where it's like, so it's nb.py space getignore or .getignore.
It's what I pasted and what's in the curriculum there. Yeah.
Echo is basically a print statement.
It's a terminal's print. Echo is the terminal print statement. So we're saying print the string env.py into a file called .getignore. It's a nice little one-liner to generate a file or append a file. Yeah. So if you already had a getignore, this would append the file. Yeah. Okay. How we doing, folks? Did y'all get the PyMySQL installed? You're making a getignore file with that one-liner. I put that one-liner in Slack. It's also in the curriculum. And I need to restart my notebook, apparently. Okay. Now, what I want to do is show you, before we get too far and before I have y'all create your env file, and work in it, I want to show you what this looks like. Now that you've added a file that we need to be ignored before we even create it, we'll add it to get ignored. So what we do need to do, once we've ignored that file, we're going to generate a file called env.py. Okay, so when I do this, I'm going to say code space env.py. And this is going to be a couple of variables, a couple of Python variables. That's really it. Notice I have a variable for the host. I have a variable for the username, and then a variable for the password. And just in case somewhere I use user, in another place I use username, I'm duplicating that variable here. Now, what are your login credentials? And what is the host? What is your username? What is your password? Folks, you're going to find this on the Google Classroom. Go to the section of assignments for SQL. And then there's an entry for each of you called Coda Cloud Database Credentials. Credentials is another way of saying logins. Okay, so your login will be whatever's in there. Your username is Jemison _ some number. The host is going to be the same at 157.230.209.171. That's also in your Coda Classroom. And you're going to put the password in a string. All three of these values are strings. Okay.
That's the thing you just set up.
Yeah, because we're talking to the same database. Now, here's what this is going to give us. And I want you to tune into this and make this env file during exercise time. So once you have your env file, you can and then import the host, the user, and the password. Those are only strings. Those are variables. And notice what this URL is doing is using the format string to stitch together the protocol, // the user, whatever that is, / the password, @ symbol, the host name. And then right here where we have /employees, this is kind of hard coded. This connection string is hard coded to talk to the employees database. So in the exercise, when the exercise says make a function that takes in a string that's the name of the database, you'll add on a database variable, curly braces right there. Okay. Here's what this gives us. Once you stitch this URL together, we can then run pd.readSQL. Read SQL function has at least 2 arguments. There's a handful of other default arguments that we can override. The first argument is a string containing syntactically correct SQL. Select star from employees, limit 5, offset 50, whatever. The second variable is that connection string. Okay. Check this out. If the internet's on, if the server's working, this sends a request over the internet and gets back those records from the SQL server. I'll show you another example. It's general because we might have strings or quotations inside of your SQL statement. What I'm going to do here is do a triple quoted string, because what this is going to do is select employee number, first name, last name from employees, and then notice the gender is being limited to the F character. So by having the triple quoted strings, we don't have to use escape characters. We just type what we need to type. And again, pd.readSQL, the first argument is a string containing SQL. If you have a syntax error in your SQL, you get a syntax error from pandas. If you have something wrong with your password or credentials, you get an error talking to you about your credentials. And bam. Why did this take a little while to run? Because I had to send it over the whole dang internet. Yeah. Talk to the SQL server. SQL server sends SQL back. The SQL is sent into pandas and interpreted as a data frame, which is really cool stuff. The only thing, what we need to be mindful of is if we need to talk to a different database than employees, like if we needed to talk to the Chipotle database, we would put the string Chipotle there, or whatever the database name is. And if the database name has a typo, we get back database name not found, because it's a typo. Again, pd.read SQL will set the query. Now I'm talking to the title and I'm doing some joins. Now, we don't expect you to just magically remember and write perfectly syntactically correct SQL from scratch here. Load up your MySQL workbench, write the SQL that you need to write to get the right data. Once you have the right data in your result set, then copy that SQL from MySQL workbench, put it in a triple quoted string, then it becomes the first argument, the first input argument to that read SQL function. Okay? And remember, these take a brief moment because you're reaching across the whole dang internet. And if I don't limit to 10 and you get back 2 million records, your data frame is going to be 2 million records, right? So this is really cool stuff. This pattern of talking to SQL through pandas, this is going to be the rest of your April, other than Tableau and storytelling, the rest of your June, July, August, until graduation, right? And then on and on and on after that. Now, in a little moment, I'll show you how to read spreadsheets and other data, but this is our first little chunk, okay? So here's what I want to do to be helpful for y'all is want to make sure on these exercises, we'll get into these before lunch, make sure that you run the pip install, the Python M pip install my PyMySQL, make your git ignore, and then you'll build out your env file. So take a moment to do that. My recommendation, just to be even more paranoid about your passwords, my recommendation is to write this git db URL function inside of your env, so you can import just the function and not the string values themselves. So here's what I mean. Git db URL, and this will take the database name. And this function is not going to talk to a database itself. All this function is doing is stitching together strings, right? What you can do is, because I've seen people get hung up on this one before, copy that URL, and instead of employees here, we don't want to hard code this forever and ever, have this talk to DB name, and then return that URL. So I'm going to pull this up, leave this on the screen for a while. Your username and password are up there. You can steal mine, but it doesn't do anything. It has even less functionality than yours. So use yours. But right here, heck, I'm even going to put this in Slack for y'all, just because I've seen this cost people half an hour. I'm going to hand this to you in Slack here. There you go. Cool. Looking at these exercises, I realize I kind of did the mama bird thing on exercise 1, exercise 2, and exercise 3, but please get those knocked out. Then make yourself a nice little notebook or a Python script, call it advanced data frames, and we'll get started with these exercises before lunch, okay? Questions, if you have them, as you have them, pretty please.